The Minnesota Board of Regents meeting on June 5th, 2013 will please come to order. And today is a very important meeting where we are going to discuss, have conversation about the President's recommended fiscal year 2014 annual operating budget. Before I call on the President to make introductory remarks, I will mention that Regent McMillan and Regent Frobenius are joining us on the phone. Are you on the phone with us, Regent McMillan?
I'm here, yes.
Okay, good. And Regent Frobenius?
Yes, I am for a while.
Right, and then you'll be joining us, I know, in person. All right, good. So we'll start off with remarks from President Kaler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the board, I am extremely pleased to present to you for your review the university's fiscal year 2014 operating budget. I have always felt that if you want to know an institution's priorities, you should look at its budget. And I think this budget highlights our priorities of excellence and access. The budget I share with you today reflects three goals. One is a deep commitment to an exceptional and affordable education. Second, a passion for excellence in research and excellence in innovation to improve lives. And third, being an exceptional steward of all of our resources, public and private, through reallocation and operational excellence. I'll discuss with you our priorities and the decisions we have made to invest in excellence. I will then, with your permission, turn it over to Fitz and Julie Townsend, our budget director, to provide more detail on the specific components of the budget, and we'll leave time for questions at the end. I anticipate I'll talk for about 15 minutes if you want to set your watch. So how did we get here? Booker T. Washington is not a Golden Gopher graduate, but I do think the words on the screen are exactly what our government relations leader, Jason Roloff, said to me on May 24th after Governor Dayton signed the higher education bill. You measure the size of the accomplishment by the obstacles you had to overcome to reach your goals, and we had some obstacles. But this budget and the state's renewed investment in our students, faculty, research, and public engagement work is a huge accomplishment. Our approach to the legislature and the governor for this biennium was different from years past. We simply didn't ask for more funding. As Regent Broad said many months ago when this process began, we did not tell lawmakers and citizens what we wanted. We told them instead what we were going to do with their investment. And fundamentally, we sought to renew the historic partnership between our university and the state, a partnership that has become frayed over the past decade. We took a giant step in that process. We had many obstacles, some thrown at us by external forces and events that we did not expect. But we made a convincing case. We had an inspirational story to tell about our students, our faculty, and the state's challenges we tackle every day in our classrooms, labs, and in our public engagement. Also, we have strong supporters in the legislature, in the governor's office, in the business community, and among our alumni and friends. I thank this board for all of the legislative hearings you attended and all of the phone calls and face-to-face contacts you each made to tell our story. We kept our eyes on the prize, and with what I believe was great work by our government relations staff and others at the university, we're now able to leverage our legislative victory and advance an ambitious agenda for the 2014 fiscal year. We built our budget on the same handful of guiding principles that we used in our request to the legislature, which you approved last fall. Access and excellence, affordable world-class academics, which translates to a freeze of tuition for our Minnesota resident undergraduates and a strong effort to keep all tuition and fees as low as possible. Secondly, research and innovation, tackling and solving statewide challenges. In short, MnDRIVE, a focused approach to key research areas of strength in our university and need for our state. And thirdly, operational excellence, administrative cost reductions, where we continue to reduce and redirect funds from administration to the core missions, and we strive to be accountable and transparent in our operations. Now, before I get into the numbers for you, let me review the development process. As you know, the purpose of the budget development work is to provide operating funds to the academic units and to fund, through cost pools, an appropriate level of cost-effective central shared services. It's done by first assigning all tuition revenue and the revenue from indirect cost recovery to the units that generated it. The state appropriation is then allocated to colleges and campuses to support their operations and invest in strategic new initiatives. The second step in the process allocates the costs of central services and utilities to campuses and colleges using various cost pools. At the end of the allocation process, each academic unit budget must balance. And it's important to understand also that each academic unit budget reflects its location in the academic marketplace. They are not all the same. For example, our law school has strategically decided to move its tuition up to the median of its peer group and to ensure access to students from low and moderate income families by providing additional financial aid. Similarly, to enhance its undergraduate experience, the Carlson School of Management will continue to have a modest undergraduate tuition differential, which was approved by the board last year. So I'll now walk you through the specifics of this budget and the framework upon which it's built. So let me review the state's appropriation for the 2014 biennium that you see in front of you. We entered with base level appropriations of $545 million in each year of the biennium. The state funding level that was approved by the legislature and signed by the governor is $577 for this year and $591 next year for a biennial total of $1.167 billion. The change from the base you see is $77 million for the biennium. Change from prior year is smaller in 15 because that is just the tuition freeze dollars, and a total overall increase of our base of 7.1%. To put that in context, here is a slide that you have seen before, which outlines the relatively bumpy roller coaster ride of state investment and disinvestment in the university in this century. The journey sees the state disinvest in this university in 7 of those years, and this year's state investment is the first appropriation increase in 6 years. It is remarkable that we have had 6 years with no new state investment, despite the fact that during those years we started a whole new campus in Rochester, we increased enrollment, we invested in new technology, managed increased energy costs, fought to retain our top faculty, and faced other key cost drivers, many of which are out of our control. So with the new state investment, this budget advances the 2 key principles that I have outlined. First is to use the new state investment to stabilize tuition for Minnesota resident undergraduates, and secondly, to make strategic, targeted investments in our research enterprise that will clearly contribute to Minnesota's economy and growth through the MnDRIVE initiative. The hallmark of this budget is the commitment to affordability and access for Minnesota resident undergraduate students, and our commitment to limit increases in fees for all of our students, graduate and undergraduate. To those ends, this budget includes freezing tuition for resident undergraduates for 2 years. This is in the context of an increase in state and federal need-based aid in the Pell Grant program and the state grant program. 11,000 Pell-eligible students will receive an average increase of $718 and a $95 increase in the federal Pell award. That, combined with the tuition freeze, I think is a remarkable amount of additional help to our most needy students. There is no increase in campus and collegiate fees for the first time in decades, and I think Fitz may mention how many decades, but it has been a long time. There is no increase in those fees. And the combination of holding the tuition and requires fees to these low numbers leads to a decrease in cost to Crookston of 0.1%. Morris increases by 0.3, Duluth by 0.2, and the Twin Cities by 0.7%. Budget also includes increasing the differential between resident and non-resident undergraduate students. As you probably remember, a number of years ago, in a strategy to address the decline in our college-age population in the upper Midwest, the university implemented a plan to grow our out-of-state student body, and it worked. We did that by maintaining a relatively low out-of-state undergraduate tuition, and while we've been able to attract talented students from out-of-state, I believe we're now in a position to modestly increase the non-resident, non-reciprocity rate. We will still remain one of the lowest among our peers. And secondly, it's keeping graduate and professional tuition aligned with market conditions and peers. As I talk to students, this tuition freeze will make a real difference for them and for their families. It will give them more financial and career options, and this predictability will allow them to budget. And with student fees, as Fitz and Julie will detail in a bit, even with the proposed 3.9% room and board rate increase, our housing costs, and this is important, will be 11th cheapest in the current Big Ten, and then 13 out of 14 if you include Maryland and Rutgers. Using fiscal 13 rates, only our friends in Wisconsin are cheaper, and that's by $25 for double room and board. So the other key element is on the slide in front of you, investment in research and innovation. This university has a unique and singular role as the state's only comprehensive public research university, and this investment will ensure our state and our industries will benefit from the fruits of this really amazing place. As you know, the Minnesota Discovery Research and Innovation Economy, or MnDRIVE, is a new program in state law. The purpose is to discover new knowledge through scientific research, advancing the economy, building on our strengths, improving our health and quality of life, improving our competitiveness and capacity, and position our state as a national leader in key areas. The FY14 appropriation includes funding for research initiatives in 4 specific areas, and I talk about these all the time. I'm hoping all of you remember them. 1, robotics, sensors, and advanced manufacturing. Secondly, food, becoming the Silicon Valley of the food industry. Advancing industry and conserving the environment by managing our water resources appropriately. And finally, advancing treatments and discoveries in neuromodulation, diseases of the brain and central nervous system. This is funded by a $17.8 million new recurring state appropriation. And our initial projections say that this will lead to more than 50 new faculty positions, more than 70 graduate student positions, and advances across the board. These dollars will be leveraged with federal research grants, with private philanthropy, and with partnerships from industry. The return and investment on these dollars will be enormous. New state investment in lieu of tuition revenue, and reallocations will also support critical needs to maintain excellence across the system. We will invest in world-class faculty hires in targeted areas, as you see before you, vet med, Carlson Pharmacy, Crookston, CEHD. We will upgrade classrooms and laboratories across the system. We will target instructional and student services support, particularly in the College of Liberal Arts, the law school, and our campus in Duluth. And we will deal with infrastructure needs, particularly around clinical trials management, distance delivery of central services, and the ever-important investment in our library collections. Again, investments that will return significantly and provide an exceptional academic experience. We also have critical institutional priorities that ensure we continue to provide an exceptional education. We're continuing to provide a competitive compensation plan to retain and recruit world-class faculty and staff through a budgeted 2.5% compensation increase. As you know, this university competes on a national and global market. World-class, top-flight faculty members are in demand, and we have to fight in the international talent market to recruit and to retain them. For example, we recently and successfully recruited one of the world's leaders in neuroscience from an institute in Spain. That's the reality we face. Our competition is not only North Dakota, Iowa, or Wisconsin, and it is not only the very wealthy U.S. private universities, Harvard, Stanford, and MIT, that want our faculty. It's also the growing global higher education sector in India, China, and Korea. When it comes to these compensation increases, it's also important to put them in the context of the past 5 years. In FY10 and FY12, you will remember the university froze wages, no increases. In FY11, the university implemented a 2% increase for faculty and academic staff halfway through the year, a mandatory furlough, and a temporary pay reduction. In addition to the compensation, there are costs that simply go up every year. They are things like utilities, which increase year over year, and the new operating costs we incur when new facilities come online. Before I turn this over to Vice President Fitzenreiter, let me discuss the administrative cost reductions that are a critical part of both the legislative appropriation and this budget. The biennial framework that we proposed and this board approved as part of our legislative request last fall included redirecting $28 million of existing resources to our core mission over the next 2 years, or $14 million annually. This session, the legislature wrote into statute a metric to reduce, calling upon us to reduce our administrative expenses by $15 million in FY14. This FY14 budget recommendation actually exceeds our goal of $14 million in reallocation, and in fact includes $19.7 million in redirected resources and cost reductions. Of that $19.7 million, $10 million is in targeted administrative cost reductions towards the $15 million goal. And during this fiscal year, we will track unit reallocations and reductions and certainly identify the remaining $5 million to reach our goal. This level of operational excellence remains my top priority, and we will work hard to reduce administrative costs for the benefits of our students. So, Madam Chair and members of the board, I am proud of this budget. It reflects our key shared priorities. It provides enormous cost relief to our students. It makes critical targeted investment, and it advances operational excellence. I'm thankful to the governor, the legislature, and the people of Minnesota for their investment in their only public research university. And I'm thankful to you as a board for your support as we made this important progress. So with that, I will turn the presentation over to Fitz and Julie to provide additional detail on the various revenue and expenditure components. And when they're done, we will welcome, of course, your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want you to know that you hit 15 minutes to the second. So, we're really eager to discuss this budget, which is a remarkable budget. But we'll first hear the details. Vice President Fitzenreiter and Director Tollison.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, much of this information will go through rather quickly. But I do want to remind the board that next week in the Finance Committee is where we traditionally spend about 2 hours diving into the details of this budget. We will highlight some of those slides today and be ready with quite a presentation next week as well. This first slide, just to inform the board that we anticipate the overall budget for fiscal 14 to approximate about $3.6 billion. This slide is the traditional one in which we split it between sponsored and non-sponsored spending, and then you can see that we anticipate about $600 million in sponsored expenditures next year and about $3 billion in non-sponsored, of which we spend a lot of time next week talking about the non-sponsored spending. But you can see that of the O&M state special tuition, ICR, and Central Reserves portion of this budget, it's about $1.6 billion. And then what we refer to as the local unit generated, whether that's auxiliary operations, ISOs, clinical income, grants and contracts, other federal appropriations, about $1.4 billion. This chart does have about $225 million of internal budget spending and things like printing services and fleet services and engineering shops, et cetera. But when we show you a pie chart, because that is internal spending, the respending of revenues, we show you that the actual budget, excluding the ISOs, will be about $3.4 billion next year. That number is about 1.9% or approximately $61 million higher than what we anticipate the end of this fiscal year to be. And you can see in here that tuition revenue will be about 24% of the total budget next year. In fiscal 14, I can tell you that when we showed you this slide for fiscal 13, last year was about 25%. So you can see the freeze having an effect, and the state support has increased to, it's rounded here to 18% of the budget. And you can see the other major components of the centrally attributed and distributed revenues. Again, those are the most flexible and most important dollars the university has. It's total what we anticipate $1.6 billion. These are the dollars that do support the majority of our mission activities, and are the most flexible funds that the university has. In developing the budget, this particular slide, every year, and certainly every other year when we prepare for a binary request, we devise a budget framework. We think about, well, what resources are going to be available, what are our costs and investments, and then we go to work balancing the budget. This chart is the incremental change in those centrally attributed and distributed revenues. And you can see that for fiscal 14, the increased, the resources from increased state appropriations, one-time resources, unit resources, et cetera, and then the expenditure plan. Each of the next couple of pie charts shows you the components. So on the incremental resources, clearly the state appropriation is about 44% of the available resources. 12.3 million in this budget is institutional resources of a non-recurring nature. And I, of course, will anticipate a question from Regent Allen about whether we've created any structural budget issues here, and we have not. We are aware of what our costs are, and we'll be talking about our projected fiscal 15 costs next week. And you can see the unit resources of 19.7 million and the tuition revenue of 8.7, which really represents changes coming from the increase in the non-resident rate of $1,000, as well as the graduate and professional increases that are included in that 8.7. And then unit resources are really made up of the reallocation of funds in the budget, ICR revenue, and some other miscellaneous income that the units bring to the table to help meet costs. On the incremental expenditure side, 71.8 million. We are, as the President mentioned, providing a compensation pool increase of 2.5% in this budget. We have recurring and non-recurring investments in mission support and operations. But you can see the vast majority of this budget is focused on academic investments, certainly and that's made up of both the MnDRIVE program at nearly 18 million and the allocation of those dollars, as well as other academic investments we're making through using the state appropriations, the tuition revenue from the grad and professional, as well as internal budget reallocations to higher priority items. Next slide, you are aware that the legislature set 5 performance metrics for the university in legislation. Again, the President highlighted one of those initiatives or those metrics, and that's for fiscal 14, decrease administrative costs by $15 million. And this budget already identifies $10 million, and we'll be highlighting that list for you again next week in the Finance Committee. We have $5 more million to identify, and that will be done through the course of the year, and we'll be back, I'm sure, in front of the Finance Committee during the course of the year. And before that actual report of that $15 million is given to the legislature, we will itemize that for board members so you can see what those choices are. But we're very confident on all 5 of these metrics that we're going to make them. We're going to work hard during the course of this year to make each of those metrics. Those metrics are tied to releasing $26.5 million, 5% of our fiscal 15 appropriation. But we'll sit here today very confident that we plan to make all 5. We need to make 3 of the 5. And we're very confident we can make 3 of those 5. But we're not satisfied with that. We're going to try to make all 5. This slide shows you, for just an example, for the Twin Cities campus. The budget document itself has these examples for all 4 campuses. What the impact of the tuition fees, room and board is on a typical undergraduate resident living in the residence hall. And you can see the President highlighted the subtotal on tuition required fees going up $95 or 0.7%. It's really driven, that $95 you can see driven by the student service fees increase. And as members know, that is a student-driven process overseen by Vice President Jerry Reinhardt and approved all the way up the organizational change here. But the big driver of that $93 increase in the student service fees is increases in the rec sports fees due to the opening of the new rec center this fall. In fact, that particular of that $93 increase, half of it, or I should say 3/4 of the increase in that fee as a result of the student rec fee for the new facility. The other factor in that fee increase is a new increase for, at the request of students, for more mental health services at Boynton Health Center. So that is also a contributor to that increase. If the rec fee was not increased at all and all the other recommendations were approved, the fees would have only increased 3%. So again, it is really driven by the rec fee. There are 89 unique items funded through the student fee process, and they are given a lot of due diligence, but this year's increases are really focused in the Boynton Health fee, primarily in the rec fee. I do want to turn to my colleague, Julie Tennyson, just to walk through some additional fee impacts in the budget. As you know, over the last 3 years, we've been coming back to the board, refining and clarifying the Regents' tuition and fee policy. We have built a new, this is the first year we've used a new fee system at the institution to track and approve fees, and I'll just turn to my colleague here to give you a brief overview of the other fees that are increasing, and I can tell you, as she'll point out, there's not very many.
Good morning. As President Kaler mentioned, we have worked really hard to limit increases in these fees for FY14. These are the categories of fees outside of the student services fee and outside of room and board. So they are the academic fees, the college or campus fees, the miscellaneous term fees, and then the course fees. The recommended increases in these categories really have been narrowed down to 4 particular cases, and they are listed here. Occasionally, we have new courses that come on board that are in a category of fees that we have traditionally charged a fee for. Art, for example, so they have a new art course. In ceramics, they would traditionally charge a fee for that, so you will see some of that in here. We have also cases in which the costs that the units are facing for the supplies that are covered by this fee income, those costs are increasing significantly, and there are a few increases related to that, particularly you will see in dentistry and in chemistry. And then we have external costs that are really pass-throughs. So if you think about some of the study abroad programs that are operating as a course fee, for example, or a program fee, we have one, for example, in the College of Science and Engineering Masters of Technology program where they go to Israel and Jordan. The costs are increasing for that trip, so you will see that as an increase here. And then finally, as Fitz mentioned, we have a new fee system, and as a result of that, have really taken a look at how the fees are structured, and there is some restructuring. So you're going to see cases in which ceramics, as I mentioned earlier, might have had tiers of fees, 3 tiers. They've looked at the courses and the costs and restructured that into 4 tiers. And that looks like an increase. It doesn't provide new revenue, but it looks like a new fee in the fee listing. So you will see that as well. The results of these recommendations are in the boxes on the academic fees. As was mentioned earlier, for campus and collegiate fees, there are no increases. They are listed in the attachment in the budget document. In the miscellaneous term fee category, 87% of those fees are either the same or decreasing, and in the course fee area, 83% are staying the same or decreasing. So we've really limited those increases.
And Madam Chair, we'll turn back to the board here for questions.
All right. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm sure there will be questions and comments from board members. So, Regent Simmons.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. Mr. President, I have 2 questions about this budget. The first is about sort of how safe it is in terms of weathering some of the external forces over which we don't have control or don't have complete control. Things like government regulations that require putting into place administrative processes and people to manage. Of course, we could always take less federal research dollars and cut our costs there, but that wouldn't be a very good idea. The market forces that require us to compete for recruiting and retaining faculty and other employees, and of course healthcare, because we're a provider of healthcare, we're an insurer for healthcare, and we are an employer dealing with that. So I guess I'm looking for some assurance that we are okay, because you're taking a lot of money out of administrative costs that are affected by these things.
Right. Regent Simmons, Chair Cohen, we spend a lot of time worrying about those three elements. So let me just sort of walk through them. The federal regulation piece is really related to our capacity or appetite for risk. And we have been extremely thorough in limiting our risk. And in that situation, there are cases where we perhaps are using a belt and the suspenders when maybe we could get by with one of those. We will be fully compliant with all federal and state rules, regulations, and laws, of course, but we look hard at the infrastructure we have around providing that kind of security. And there are modest opportunities, I think, to do better there. On healthcare, we are very mindful of the need to address that. We are vulnerable to the Cadillac tax that our benefit plan would do. We are in the last stages of finalizing a new health plan for our employees that will avoid the Cadillac tax and maintain the institutional commitment to be as budget-wise as possible. The impact of administrative needs when we do externally funded research is real, and we anticipate that there will be from time to time a need for us to improve that. We're focusing on our clinical studies, for example, and we'll probably see needs there. We will look for every possible opportunity to have external funding sources pay for those individuals as we can. The reductions here are on the state O&M side. But it's a very appropriate and exactly the kind of governance question that this board should be asking, and I believe we're in as safe a place as we can be.
Is there a follow-up, Regent Simmons?
Yes, please. First, thank you. I find that to be a satisfactory answer. That gives me more comfort. My second question is this. We of course have the need for funding our core operations, all our operations. We also have some strategic objectives, priorities that have been set by the administration and by this board. And two of those are graduation rates, continual improvement of graduation rates, and recruiting and retaining faculty. Will this budget in any way compromise the investments that these strategic objectives require in order to be achieved?
Absolutely. Regent Simmons, Chair Cohen, absolutely not. The goal of graduation rates and retaining high-quality faculty, of course, are two of the things that I worry about every day. We have a good structure in place, a very good structure in place for advising students, for admitting students, orienting them for success, and they are reflected in the year-on-year improvement in our 4-, 5-, and 6-year graduation rates, and I have every confidence that those will continue. That infrastructure is in place, and we're not disinvesting in that. And our ability to recruit and retain faculty will be enhanced by the compensation increase. That compensation increase will be applied in a very smart way, in a merit-driven way. But the market for high-quality faculty is fierce, and we are regularly vulnerable to approaches, particularly from well-funded private institutions, and we have to fight those off. State funds are a way to do that, and enhanced philanthropy, as you know, is one of my goals as well. That's an important addition.
Thank you.
Regent Devine.
I'd like to just comment, Chairman Cohen, and say, Eric, congratulations on really moving the dial here and following up this last year and really getting one of the priorities I think that we articulated last year about trying to freeze tuition, freeze costs for students. The budget that we've now got in front of us and the fees and the structures that go with that have really addressed that very formidably, and I think that it's a clear signaling that we've listened carefully to what's been said by the public, and since you came aboard here, we've had a real directed effort on accomplishing that. I'd also like to note, I'd like to continue to see this aggressiveness in terms of what we're doing here, because I think that the public is looking for that, and I think our students are looking for that, and to the extent that we can continue to keep that dialogue going and challenge ourselves to reduce these costs, we need to do that as appropriately as possible without compromising our overall goals and missions and what we still want to see accomplished.
Regent Devine, Chair Cohen, thank you for the compliment. I do believe that I have succeeded in getting the institution's attention around the need for us to do better with what we do. This is a very good institution. We have opportunities to do better, but we will not cut costs at the expense of the excellence of what we do. And so we will continue to keep the pedal down. We'll continue to look for operational excellence. We'll continue to provide good stewardship of federal and state and private funds. But you will not be able to see this level of reduction year upon year upon year. We'll get better every year. But right now, these past 2 years have gotten us up to a space. The studies that were ongoing, and you'll see in subsequent board meetings about benchmarking and spans and layers, will be additional tools that will enable us to be more effective and efficient. But again, we do this on the foundation of the excellence in research, teaching, and service we provide, and that costs money.
Regent Allen.
Thank you, Mr. President, for a good budget. I think this is an excellent budget, and I'm particularly excited about the tuition freeze. I think I just mentioned something that I think we plan to explore next week in the Finance Committee and probably in the full board, is the other part of freezing tuition, and that is the aid, financial aid that's available. I think we plan to look at that in detail, and I expect maybe in our hearing this afternoon we'll hear comments about affordability despite what we're doing here today. So I think that's an important item, and I do look forward to that.
Regent Allen, Chair Cohen, indeed, the institution provides $130 million a year in grant aid and tuition relief. We have a very good story to tell about our net cost profile and about median debt levels that our students take on, and we'll explore that in detail with the Finance Committee next week, but it is a good story.
Okay, Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. Thank you, staff and President, for the budget proposal. It seems to me that going forward, these budgets have to have a balanced approach of modest increases from the state, ongoing cost reductions, and strategic investments. There's also a fourth category that I think may be available to us. I think there's been a sea change among our stakeholders and the public about the crisis that higher education is in. And so we talked a little bit about this, but the opportunity to undertake a large scholarship-focused campaign strikes me in an improving economy as something that we should really look at as we restaff the foundation. And but I think there's, sympathy is not the right word, but I think there's so much attention on us, and our needs are so great that we look at that. Second, on the cost side, President Kaler referenced the studies and initiatives. We've got dozens of these sort of activities going on, and I was pleased to see in the budget the reference to some of the conclusions that have been drawn. So these studies, when they're done, they can't sit on their credenza. They have to be referenced during the budget process. And there will be more opportunities for savings. We may surprise ourselves as we get more results and more analysis in, and I think that will be the source of our investment dollars going forward. And so the discipline, and President Kaler, you're introducing this of connecting the work that's going on the cost savings side into the budget process. It's really every 2 years. I mean, although we approve the budget annually, this is the most important part of the budget, is the beginning of the biennium. It sets out the footprint for the rest of the year. Thank you.
So, if I may, Regent Beeson, Chair Cohen, what we are doing is providing a set of tools so that our top-line managers have what they need at their disposal to manage their budget. And so what you see is an increasing conversation with deans and with our campus chancellors about what are they doing and how we're holding them accountable, while at the same time providing them the tools and structure to be able to deliver on their mission in the best possible way. And so it's that accumulation of these tools and benchmarking and spans and layers methodologies that we're enabling our managers to be more effective. So it really is giving tools and holding accountable.
Regent McMillan, I just want to check in with you to see if you have questions or comments now, or I can call on you again in a little bit.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. I won't echo the sentiments of my peers. Certainly, I'm pleased to see much of this as well. I've been following up with members of the administration on a couple of professional school tuition-related issues that I don't need to get into now. I'll continue to follow up on those and have some more feedback for the Finance Committee perhaps next week. But the one overarching comment I would make, I continue to be very interested in the work that Vice President Brown and President Kaler are doing around job categories and classifications and that entire initiative. So in the spirit of Regent Beeson's comment a moment ago, evaluating all of this, how much progress we've made and how much more we can make in terms of driving down our administrative costs and managing our overall cost profile as the state steps up to help us on the revenue side, remains a work in progress. And I'm not ready to draw any conclusions as to how much further we can go without some of that work coming home and getting a chance to see that, whether it's at the committee level or the board as a whole. So I know that's a priority of President Kaler's. It's a particular priority of mine, and I look forward to more of that. But overall, this is impressive, and I generally like what I see.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a comment?
Yes, Regent McMillan, Chair Cohen, thank you. And again, the Job Families is one more example of a tool in the toolbox that we can use to manage the place better.
Okay. Regent Trevenius.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. In my mind, I'll share my comments with others that I think generally we have a good budget that has some good processes that have been put in place. We're responding to one particular need in terms of the tuition freeze for undergraduate students and some efforts to try to catch up in a lot of spots. Like any good budget, it's a compromise, and there's some catch-22s in this budget that I have a little concern about. And I just want to identify them for this point in the discussion. Our Finance Committee will have a chance to get into a bit more detail. I kind of ask myself what happens to us 2 years from now. I know the assumptions we've made in our past long-range plans about what level of state support we might receive. My sense of the term freeze is every time you freeze, there's a cliff to climb at the end of the freeze. And I don't know what we've done. If we had different kinds of cost accounting systems, we could have a little better feel for that. But I do think we need to spend a little time. I mean, we'll probably end up doing this budget, so I'm not suggesting we're not going to do the budget, because I think we should. But I do think we need to understand pretty clearly pretty soon what happens 2 years from now. As I look through the specific tuition schedules, it's a constant reminder to me. We've been very responsive to a projected and a communicated problem with our undergraduate students. And we've sort of heard a similar message from our graduate students, and we're not as responsive there. And it's a little more complex issue, quite frankly, to understand. It varies from program to program. But I think that's an issue we'll also need to have some time spent on in the next couple of years. Within this budget, I'll be a little more specific than Regent McMillan was. I too have had some comments and discussion with the law school over the first-year resident rate increase. I'm still haven't got my arms around that in a way that I'm comfortable with that point. And the one that I don't understand yet and would like to have some time, maybe offline, to have a little bit more understanding of is the increases, the 4.7 increases that seem to be occurring throughout the years in the medical school. And I just don't quite understand that. That's different than where I thought we were going with that. So I'd like either in our committee or privately to have an opportunity to hear more about that. So my catch-22 summary point is that we've probably got a pretty good budget. We may or may not want to do any fine-tuning with it. But at the end of the day, I think it really raises some questions of where are we 2 years from now?
Regent Frobenius, Chair Cohen, excellent points all the way around. Where we will be 2 years from now is in what I hope is a progressive and fruitful conversation with our partners in the legislature and the governor about reinvesting in the University of Minnesota, and in that conversation, a discussion about what undergraduate tuition should look like going forward. So that is really incumbent on me and my team over this next 2-year period to begin to develop that. We do now have a fairly robust long-range financial planning tool, which will outline what the needs are, and we will meet those by cost reductions and revenue increases. The graduate student tuition is an interesting subject, and I'll be brief on this in the cause of time. Part of it is a journey has many steps, and as I looked at the landscape, frankly, politically, what would work, there's a lot of interest in supporting access to undergraduate education, and clearly we managed to put forward and receive the money needed to freeze undergraduate tuition. Frankly, there's less political enthusiasm around the cost of graduate education, and a feeling of the balance between public good and private good, that a public good of undergraduate education is high. The perceived private good of graduate education by the public is higher. So that's where that conversation is. There's also an issue of how much money was feasible to request, and we didn't get all of what we asked for. I think it was unlikely in this political environment for us to do much better than we did, frankly, and so that was a balance of addressing the undergraduate side first. I would like to have that conversation with state leaders around professional education. It's probably easier for medicine and vet med in Minnesota than for some others, but that's a conversation to be had. So it's a more complicated situation. The final point I'll make is about the law school tuition. That school is one of the top 20 top 20 law schools in the country. Their view clearly is that operating within a high tuition, high aid model lets them shape a class that enables them to meet their goals for makeup of the class, as well as maintaining the quality of students that they need to maintain the ranking in the law school. So that is a model that they believe works. We have empirical evidence that it does work. Will it work forever? I don't know, but I do defer to the expertise of deans of colleges and professional fields about what the market carries and what that structure looks like, and they're comfortable that this is a good model for us now.
Thank you. Regent Omari.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. Regent Frobenius touched on the graduate increase in tuition that I was actually going to bring up, and so I guess I'll just draw the attention that is a big piece of the preliminary budget solution on page 12 for fiscal year 2015, and then also couple that with the presentation that we had from the Dean of the Graduate School talking about applicants at the U for graduate students going down, and how those two things might play out in the next 2 years. So I just wanted to draw attention. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Regent Broad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just had a quick question relative to net spending increases. Vice President Fitzenreiter, can you just make it very clear relative to, I know there's a lot of movement internal to this budget where with reallocation, there's a lot of movement internal to this budget appropriately in terms of reducing costs internally, administrative and otherwise. But what is the net?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
members of the committee, Regent Broad, on an I can give you the all funds basis. We project that the budget will increase about 1.9% or 61 million. But that's an all funds view of the budget. So that includes parking revenues or housing or the rest. You may be wanting to zero down, and we'll get you that number. I don't have that one in front of me today, but I think that's where you were going with your question, is what's the net on the O&M state special tuition part of the budget, and we'll get you that number.
Great, thank you. Thank you, I appreciate that, and I like that you know where I'm going with the question. But, Mr. President, I think this budget has a lot of really good things in it. I think the tuition freeze is incumbent upon us, and I think it was really smart how you approached the new conversation with the legislature and how you approached the new conversation, I think, with the public in Minnesota. And I think it's a statement, a very loud statement by the university that matters, and it matters a lot to us. So I appreciate that. I appreciate a lot of other things internal to this budget relative to reducing administrative costs, really taking an x-ray to how we operate and trying to make sure that we're not fixing things that maybe are just shifted but are fixing things that are truly broken. And so I really think that you are spot on in your focus on operational excellence, which then drives all sorts of really good things monetarily and also from a reputation standpoint. So I think that those are great opportunities within this budget. I have a few concerns within the budget relative to those spending numbers, because I too worry a little bit about just higher ed generally and the University of Minnesota's role within that higher ed system in terms of affordability, not just for folks on the lower end of the scale, but for the middle class and for people who don't have access to aid, either from a merit standpoint. They're good students, but maybe they just don't quite meet that merit aid, or from an income standpoint. I worry a lot about that relative to who we bring through our professional programs, and that's some of the concern I have with some of the increases in the professional programs, specifically the law school and Carlson School. I worry about these kids from Laverne, Minnesota, whose mom and dad or grandparents were lawyers, and they want to be lawyers too, but they make small town lawyer salaries that don't allow them to have access to that they don't have access to aid because they make too much, and they don't have access to the dollars to put into the system because they make too little. So I worry a little bit about that group of people and how that impacts our rural communities, how that impacts our state more generally. I worry a little bit about the spending increases in how they potentially could eat up the freeze that we all care a lot about. We have a tuition freeze that is important, and it's an important freeze for a couple years. And I want to make sure that it's kind of following up to Regent Fabinius's comment, I want to make sure that we're preparing to assure those students that they don't have a big leap after the freeze is done, and to assure the students that we are holding our spending to a place that doesn't eat that freeze up. I worry a little bit about the residency fees and the fees of actually residing at the university in terms of the cost increase to the students. And I know generally there's cost increase out there just in terms of cost of living, but the cost of housing is going down in a lot of places, and I think we just need to be careful with the market standpoint there. I worry a little bit about the health care and how the Cadillac tax that we're being faced with from the federal government, and how that impacts not just our employees, but how it impacts the students in terms of the cost increases that it will either require or force. So I worry a little bit about some of those things. So I'm not a cynic most of the time. But I do worry a lot about the structure of higher education and the tipping point that we're in relative to how we make sure that we're providing a good, quality, affordable education. And I know, Mr. President, that is every single one of the everybody sitting at this table cares a lot about those things. And so I just want to make sure that we're putting forward a budget that is extremely forward-thinking and bold, relative to holding costs down where it makes sense and investing where it makes sense. I'm not somebody who says that you across the board cut. I think you have to spend smart, and I think your budget spends smart in a lot of ways. I just want to make sure that we're spending smart not just today, but we're spending smart and planning ahead for a budget that spends smart in 2 years from now, 4 years from now, and recognizes the market changes that higher ed is going through. Those are all the things I worry about, Mr. President.
I imagine you may have a comment,
I
Mr.
do, but
President.
I'll be brief, Madam Chair, Regent Broad. I agree with you. I worry about pretty much all those same things. I think I characterize to somebody without being too Shakespearean about it, if I'm here when we get to July 1, I will have completed 2 years of my term, and that's sort of the end of the beginning. And we're now moving into a situation where we can drive what we've been doing further into the institution and make it regular and routine. And that level of efficiency will enable us to reduce costs. I think the conversation about the value that we bring relative to that cost is a serious one, and I think we don't always do a good job of telling our story about how valuable that law school education is and how that can translate to our friends in Southwest Minnesota. I think the ability in the professional schools are to, again, look at cost control as well as look at market for those degrees is important. We talk about the law school is important to the veterinary school, too, and to the dental school and to the medical school. So I share all of the things that you worry about, and we're going to work on them every day.
Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, Mr. President, and to Vice President Fitzenreiter and your staff, thank you for what I call a creative and trusted budget. And I think that's important that we trust the budget and the priorities that are set forth. And I expect we will pass it next week when we gather. A couple just quick questions. The out-of-state tuition increase, what are the probabilities of less students applying because of that, and how do we, the word I'm looking for, look in the other Big Ten schools as far as the out-of-state tuition?
So, Regent Johnson, Chair Cohen, our out-of-state tuition will still be low compared to our peer group, but it will grow. And we will monitor the yield curve on this very carefully. And clearly, that's where we are. How financial aid might impact that remains to be seen. So this is a work in progress, and our goal obviously is to continue to maintain robust enrollment even with an increased tuition, and we'll watch that very carefully.
Madam Chair, a follow-up on the MnDRIVE initiative, the four projects or disciplines, if you will. Has there been interest in outside investment in those at this early stage? Folks say, we like what the university is doing, therefore we'd like to participate.
Regent Johnson, Chair Cohen, I don't know specifically, but I would be enormously surprised if every single one of these doesn't already have external partners. I will assert they do. And as this is highlighted and grows, will certainly attract others. This particularly, I'll speak authoritatively about the food initiative, has a lot of external interest and partnership possibilities.
Regent Larson.
Vice President Fitzenreiter, do you have a rough idea of the percentage of the non-residents who come from non-reciprocity states? Because if I understand it correctly, this tuition increase for non-residents will not directly affect those students who come from reciprocity states like Wisconsin, South Dakota. I think it's Wisconsin, South Dakota, North Dakota. Is that what it is?
Madam Chair, Regent Larson, you're correct. That $1,000 will not impact the reciprocity students. They will pay the Minnesota resident rate. But I have some statistics here for the freshman class of this year. We had 18.8% were from those reciprocity states. 12.8% of the entering class were from other U.S. states, and 5.2% were international. So you have 18% of the total would have been impacted by this increase.
Okay, and if I understand it correctly, even with the increase in the non-resident, non-reciprocity states, we still are quite competitive. Do I have that about right?
Yes.
So those people who come from non-reciprocity states, we still are offering a pretty good value package.
All right, well, thank you very much, President Kaler, Vice President Fitzenreiter, Director Tonneson, and all of you who worked on this budget. Certainly, you've presented the board with a very strong budget. And the board, thank you for your very thoughtful comments and questions, and clearly how seriously we take the budget, because it is one of the most important things that we do as Regents. We will have an opportunity to continue the discussion in the Finance Committee next week, and then as a whole board at the board meeting next Friday. So thank you very much. And all right, I have to give you the exact dates. The committee's work, before adjourning the meeting, I want to provide a status update on the board's performance evaluation of the president. The committee established for this purpose has been meeting and working on the review. The committee's work will conclude on June 12th, 2013. At the next open Board of Regents meeting on June 14th, 2013, the committee will report to the board, and the board will summarize its conclusions regarding the performance evaluation. Thank you, everyone, and the meeting is adjourned.